There is a specific frequency of silence that exists only in the American suburbs on a Saturday morning. It isn't a true silence, of course. It is a textured, layered quiet. A golden hour symphony composed of distant rhythmic lawnmowers, the metronomic thwup, thwup, thwup of impact sprinklers hitting vinyl fencing, and the low, contented hum of air conditioning units battling the rising humidity. It is the sound of the American dream taking a nap. I was standing in my driveway, a pair of stainless steel tongs in one hand and a cold, condensation-slicked IPA in the other, worshipping at the altar of my Weber Genesis grill. The heat rising off the asphalt was just beginning to warp the air, creating little shimmers that danced above the blacktop. It was 11 in the morning. My wife, Sarah, was inside, likely enjoying the 30 minutes of peace before the chaos of lunch prep began. My boys, Leo and Sam, were the architects of my joy that morning. Leo, 8 years old and growing like a weed in a greenhouse, was currently trying to explain the physics of a wrist shot to his younger brother. Sam, 6 years old, and possessing the coordination of a baby giraffe on ice, was holding his street hockey stick upside down, using the blade as a microphone to sing a song of his own invention about poop. "No, Sam, look at my hands," Leo said, his voice carrying that specific older brother tone of patience mixed with existential dread. "You have to hold it like a sword, not a microphone. We're playing hockey. We're the Philadelphia Flyers." "I'm a Ninja Turtle," Sam announced, spinning in a circle and nearly whacking himself in the shin. I took a sip of my beer and flipped the burgers. The sizzle was the most beautiful sound in the world. I was a simple man. I worked 50 hours a week in supply chain logistics, moving invisible boxes from point A to point B so that people could buy toaster ovens they didn't need. I had a mortgage that made me wince every month, a knee that clicked when it rained, and a receding hairline that I was slowly coming to terms with. But right here, right now, watching my kids play on the dead-end cul-de-sac of the Oaks of Pleasant Valley, this was the payoff. This was why I endured the spreadsheets and the commute. The street was empty. It was a cul-de-sac, the appendix of the neighborhood, a paved loop that went nowhere. We saw maybe 4 cars an hour, usually just lost delivery drivers or the mailman, Phil, who drove with the urgency of a man paid by the hour. The boys had set up 2 orange plastic cones about 15 feet apart, creating a goal. They were playing with a hollow orange ball that weighed less than a hamster. It was harmless. It was innocent. It was perfect. And then, the screeching started. It didn't sound human at first. It cut through the suburban ambient noise like a jagged, rusty knife through silk. It was a high-pitched, oscillating wail that sounded like a timing belt snapping on a 1998 Honda, Civic, or perhaps a Banshee stubbing its toe. Excuse me! You there! Stop that immediately!" My stomach dropped. The burgers were forgotten. I knew that voice. Every father, mother, and dog in a 3-block radius knew that voice. It was the siren song of the Oaks of Pleasant Valley's self-appointed sheriff, the guardian of the grass, the warden of the asphalt, the Supreme Court Justice of the Homeowners Association, Mrs. Gladys Vander Hoven. I looked up from the grill, squinting against the sun. She was marching down her driveway, which was located directly across the street and 2 houses down, House 402. Mrs. Vander Hoven didn't walk. She patrolled. She mobilized. She was wearing her standard Saturday combat uniform, a floral print blouse that cost more than my first car, pristine white capri pants that seemed to repel dirt through sheer force of will, and a visor pulled so low over her eyes she had to tilt her head back to see you, giving her the perpetual look of someone sniffing something mildly unpleasant. She was waving a stack of papers. She always had papers. It was never just a conversation with Gladys. It was a citation. "Leo, hold the puck," I said, my voice dropping into the dad mode register. Calm, authoritative, but laced with internal panic. I set my drink down on the side table of the grill, the condensation leaving a ring on the metal. I wiped my hands on my apron, which read Grill Sergeant, and walked down the driveway. I positioned myself at the edge of the curb, effectively becoming a human shield between the Wicked Witch of the West and my children. Leo had frozen, his hockey stick held loosely in one hand, looking like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. Sam had stopped spinning and was watching Mrs. Vanderhoven with the open-mouthed curiosity of a child watching a clown car explode. "Good morning, Mrs. Vanderhoven," I said, forcing a smile that felt tight enough to snap my jaw muscles. "Beautiful day, isn't it? A little humid, but that's July for you." She stopped exactly at the edge of her property line. I swear she had an invisible force field there. She looked at the public street as if it were a river of lava that would melt her orthopedic sandals if she dared to step on it. She pointed a manicured finger, French tip, square cut, at Leo. "It is not a beautiful day, David," she snapped. She always called me David. "My name is Dave. I have introduced myself as Dave for 5 years. I have received mail as Dave. To her, I was David, the unruly peasant from House 408. It is a dangerous day. It is a chaotic day. It is a day of lawlessness. Your children are impeding a thoroughfare." I blinked. I looked left. I looked right. The street was completely empty. A tumbleweed could have blown across it without hitting a bumper. The only thing moving was a squirrel halfway up an oak tree, and even he looked like he was trying to stay out of her way. "Impeding a thoroughfare?" I repeated, trying to keep the incredulity out of my voice and failing miserably. "Mrs. Vanderhoven, they're playing street hockey. There aren't any cars. It's a cul-de-sac." "That is irrelevant!" she shrieked, her voice jumping an octave and cracking. "This is a public roadway. It is designed for the transit of motor vehicles, emergency response units, and municipal services. It is not a gymnasium. It is not a playground for hooligans." "Hooligans?" I chuckled nervously. "Gladys, he's 6. He's wearing a Paw Patrol t-shirt." "Do not use my first name," she hissed. "You have not earned that familiarity. And his attire is of no consequence. His actions are criminal. They are obstructing traffic flow. They are a liability. If a delivery truck were to come around that corner doing the speed limit, your children would be—" She paused for dramatic effect, her eyes widening behind her oversized sunglasses. "Flattened. Do you want them flattened, David? Is that your parenting strategy?" "The speed limit is 25, I reminded her, keeping my voice steady despite the rising heat in my chest. "And nobody does 25 around that curve unless they want to end up in the Johnsons' living room. Delivery drivers crawl down here." "The law is the law." She slapped the papers she was holding against her thigh. The sound was sharp, like a gunshot. "I have printed out the municipal code. I was up until 2 in the morning reviewing the statutes. Section 402, paragraph B. Unlawful obstruction of public right-of-way. No person shall place, maintain, or display upon or in view of any highway any unauthorized sign, signal, marking, or device which purports to be or is an imitation of or resembles an official traffic control device." She pointed at the orange cones. "Those," she declared, trembling with righteousness, "are unauthorized devices. You are confusing motorists. You are creating a hazard. I want those objects removed from the street immediately. And I want those children on the sidewalk." "There is no sidewalk," I pointed out. "This neighborhood was built in the 80s. We don't have sidewalks on this side of the street. That's why everyone walks on the edge of the road." "Then they should remain on your private property," she yelled. She was edging closer now, venturing 1 foot onto the asphalt. She looked at the street hockey ball, a soft orange plastic ball, with profound disgust, as if it were a severed head. "And the noise! My God, the noise! Clack, clack, clack! It's psychological torture. I have a migraine. My hydrangeas are wilting from the stress." I stared at her. "Your hydrangeas are wilting because my kids are playing hockey? Gladys, Mrs. van der Hoven, that's not how botany works." "It's the vibration," she insisted, creating a new branch of physics on the spot. "The impact of the sticks on the pavement creates tremors. It disturbs the root systems. I have sensitive soil." I took a deep breath. I looked at Leo. He looked terrified. He had lowered his stick to the ground. "Dad?" he whispered. "Are we going to jail?" That broke me. That little quiver in his voice. I stepped off the curb, moving fully into the street, closing the distance between me and the neighborhood tyrant. "Mrs. van der Hoven," I said, my voice dropping low and hard. "Listen to me. They aren't moving. They are playing in front of their own house. If a car comes, they move. We teach them to yell, 'Car,' and move the net. It takes 3 seconds. They are safe. They are happy. And they are staying right where they are." She went rigid, her jaw set so hard I thought her teeth might shatter. She looked at me, then at Leo, then back at me. A slow, malicious smile spread across her face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just realized the trap was sprung. It was the smile of a woman who had the manager's phone number on speed dial. "Very well, David," she said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. "You have chosen anarchy. If you refuse to adhere to the safety regulations of this municipality, if you refuse to protect your own offspring, I will be forced to involve the authorities. For the children's sake." She spun on her heel, her capri pants swishing, and marched back up her driveway. "Dad, is she calling the cops?" Leo asked, his eyes wide. "She's bluffing, Leo," I said, though I knew in my gut I was lying. "She just likes to yell. Just keep playing. But maybe keep it a little quieter, okay? No shouting." "But I'm a ninja," Sam protested. "Be a silent ninja," I advised. I went back to the grill, but the magic was gone. The burgers looked gray. The beer tasted flat. I flipped the meat, but my eyes were glued to the street. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The boys resumed playing, but hesitantly. Every time a bird chirped, they flinched. I started to too relax. Maybe she had just gone inside to watch QVC. Maybe she was bluffing. Then I saw it. The slow, creeping approach of a black and white Ford Explorer turning into the cul-de-sac. It was moving at a crawl. Silent. Predatory. The lights weren't flashing, but the presence was undeniable. My heart hammered against my ribs. I couldn't believe it. She actually did it. She actually called the police on an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old playing hockey on a Saturday morning. The cruiser rolled to a stop right in front of my house, blocking the unauthorized devices, the cones. The window rolled down. I recognized the officer immediately, Officer Miller. He was a good guy, a veteran of the force who looked like he carried the weight of the world in his utility belt. He had been to our street before, usually because Mrs. van der Hoven had reported suspicious vehicles, the mailman, or drug activity, teenagers eating pizza in a parked car. He stepped out of the car, adjusting his belt. He looked exhausted. He looked like a man who wanted to be solving murders, or robbing banks, or doing literally anything other than this. I walked down to meet him, wiping my hands on my apron again. "Officer Miller," I said, trying to sound casual, trying to hide the fact that my blood pressure was currently high enough to inflate a tire. "Burger? They're smash burgers, double cheese." Miller sighed, a long, heavy exhale that seemed to deflate his entire posture. He took off his sunglasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I wish, Dave. God, I wish. Put a jalapeno on one for me in spirit." He hitched up his pants and looked at Leo and Sam, who were now standing perfectly still, holding their hockey sticks behind their backs like they were contraband weapons. "Cute kids," Miller said. "Gretzky and Lemieux, right?" "Something like that," I said. "Let me guess. You received a call from a concerned citizen regarding what was it? An impediment to a thoroughfare?" Miller nodded toward Mrs. van der Hoven's house. Sure enough, she was standing on her porch. She wasn't hiding. She was standing with her arms crossed, looking triumphant. She gave a little wave to the officer, then pointed aggressively at the orange cones. "She called dispatch," Miller said, keeping his voice low so the kids wouldn't hear. "She didn't just call the non-emergency line, Dave. She called 911. Said there was a violent obstruction of traffic and children enduring imminent reckless endangerment. She used the words death trap. We have to respond to safety checks. You know how it is." "Miller, look at the street," I gestured, my hand sweeping across the empty asphalt. "It's a ghost town. They're playing hockey. It's a plastic ball. The heaviest thing out here is the humidity." "I know," Miller said. He looked tired. "I know, Dave. I see it. You see it. But technically," he winced as he said the word. It was the worst word in the English language. Technically. Technically, the city ordinance states that permanent or semi-permanent structures cannot be placed in the roadway, and technically pedestrian activity shouldn't impede the flow of traffic. "They aren't permanent structures," I argued, feeling the heat rise in my neck. "They're cones. I bought them at Home Depot for $5, and there is no traffic to impede." "I know," Miller repeated. "But here's the thing. If I drive away and don't do anything, and she calls the chief, which she will, and creates a paper trail saying I ignored a reported safety hazard, and then, God forbid, some delivery driver on his phone clips one of your kids, it's my badge. It's my pension." I stared at him. I looked at his weary face. I knew he was right. He was trapped in the same bureaucratic nightmare I was about to be. But the injustice of it burned in my throat like bile. She had weaponized the police. She had used the system designed to protect us, to harass us. "So what?" I asked, my voice tight. "My kids can't play outside? In the suburbs? In the summer?" "They can play in the driveway," Miller suggested weakly. "Or the backyard." "The driveway is on a slope," I said, pointing. "The ball rolls into the street every 2 seconds. The backyard is full of roots and dog poop. The street is the only flat surface. It's why we bought the house, Miller. For the cul-de-sac." "I'm sorry, Dave," Miller said. He actually sounded sincere. "I really am. But I have to give you a warning, official, verbal warning. Clear the street. Keep the obstruction out of the roadway. If I have to come back, I might have to write a ticket, and nobody wants that." He looked over my shoulder at the boys. "Hey guys, sorry about this. Just keep it on the concrete by the house, okay? You guys are playing great." Leo looked at me, devastated. He looked like his puppy had just been kicked. "Dad?" I felt a surge of anger so hot it made my vision blur for a second. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march over to House 402 and rip up her petunias. But I swallowed it. I wasn't going to get arrested for disorderly conduct in front of my children. That was what she wanted. She wanted a show. She wanted to prove that I was the unruly element in her perfect kingdom. "Come on, guys," I said, my voice flat, dead. "Grab the cones." I walked over and picked up one of the orange cones. It felt heavy in my hand. I looked up the street. Mrs. Vanderhoven was beaming. She actually clapped her hands together once, a silent applause for the restoration of order. She had won. She had wielded the police department like a personal customer service line. And it had worked. Officer Miller got back in his car. "Sorry again, Dave," he said through the window. "Try to have a good weekend." "You too, Miller," I muttered. I watched him drive away. I watched Mrs. Vanderhoven turn and sashay back into her house, satisfied that the dangerous criminals had been apprehended. We spent the rest of the afternoon inside. The boys were moody, playing video games instead of getting fresh air. Sarah was furious when I told her, railing against the busybody witch while chopping carrots with unnecessary violence. The mood in the house was heavy, defeated. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in the dark. Whir, whir, whir. The phrase kept echoing in my head. Safety hazard. Impediment to traffic. Reckless endangerment. She had used the language of safety to punish children. She had weaponized the concept of traffic laws to ensure that a dead-end street remained a mausoleum. She claimed the street was dangerous. She claimed it was a thoroughfare. I got out of bed at 2:00 a.m. I went downstairs, the wooden steps creaking under my feet. I opened my laptop and sat at the kitchen island. The blue light of the screen illuminated my face. I cracked a beer, my first since the interrupted lunch, and started typing. If Mrs. Vanderhoven wanted to talk about traffic safety, we were going to talk about traffic safety. If she truly believed, that our sleepy cul-de-sac was a high-speed death trap requiring police intervention, then surely simply removing the children wasn't enough. No, that was a band-aid. If the street was that dangerous, it required infrastructure. I pulled up the city's public works website. I searched for traffic calming measures. I found a PDF titled Residential Safety Request Form 11B. I read the requirements, then I read them again. A slow, cold grin spread across my face. She wanted the street to be safe? I was going to make it the safest damn street in the continental United States, and I was going to make sure she had a front row seat. If Saturday was the declaration of war, the following week was the siege. I woke up on Monday morning hoping that Mrs. Vanderhoven had gotten it out of her system. I hoped that the dopamine hit of seeing a police cruiser in my driveway had satisfied her hunger for dominance, like a lion that has eaten a gazelle and goes to sleep for 3 days. I was wrong. She wasn't a lion. She was a mosquito. A mosquito with a homeowner's manual and infinite free time. It started with the trash cans. In the Oaks of Pleasant Valley, trash pickup is on Mondays. The bylaws, written in 1987 by people who clearly hated joy, state that bins must be returned to a concealed location by 6:00 p.m. on the day of collection. However, Mrs. Vanderhoven had long ago started a petition to move that time to 4:00 p.m., citing unsightly curb appeal during commute hours. The HOA board, terrified of her, had adopted it as a community guideline, though not a strict rule. I work until 5. Sarah works until 5. Usually we pull the bins in when we get home. On this particular Monday, I pulled into my driveway at 5:15 p.m. I was tired. I had spent 6 hours arguing with a vendor about shipping container dimensions. I stepped out of my car, loosened my tie, and walked down to the curb to grab the blue recycling bin. It wasn't there. I frowned. I looked up the driveway. No bin. I looked down the street. Maybe the wind took it? No wind. Then I saw it. A neon orange sticker plastered to my garage door. Violation notice. Time: 4:01 p.m. Infraction: refuse containers left on public easement past designated hours. Action: reported to HOA Oversight Committee. Photo evidence taken. Yes. I ripped the sticker off. It left a sticky residue on the paint. I looked across the street. The blinds at House 402 twitched. Just a flutter. She was watching. She had been waiting by her window at 3:59 p.m., staring at her atomic clock, phone in hand, waiting for the minute hand to tick over so she could sprint across the street and slap a sticker on my house. Okay, I muttered to myself. Okay, you want to play? Tuesday was quiet, which made me nervous. Wednesday was the dog. We have a golden retriever named Buster. Buster is, clinically speaking, a rug that breathes. He has never had an aggressive thought in his life. If a burglar broke in, Buster would show him where the silverware was and ask for a belly rub. On Wednesday afternoon, Sarah was home early. She let Buster out into the backyard to do his business. Apparently, a squirrel had the audacity to run along the fence line. Buster barked. Once. Maybe twice. A deep woof woof of acknowledgement. 20 minutes later, an animal control van pulled up. Sarah told me about it when I got home, her hands shaking with rage. Dave, the guy had a snare pole. He came to the door with a snare pole. He said there was a report of a vicious, uncontrolled canine terrorizing the neighborhood. He saw Buster? I asked. Buster was asleep on the porch, she said. The guy looked at Buster, looked at the report, and actually laughed. But he had to fill out a form, Dave. He had to log a noise complaint against our dog. If we get 3, they can fine us. I looked across the street. The lights were on in House 402. I could imagine her in there, sitting in a high-backed chair, stroking a cat like a Bond villain, except she probably hated cats too because they didn't respect property lines. But the real offensive came on Thursday, the digital offensive. I made the mistake of logging into Nextdoor, the social media platform where neighbors go to accuse each other of crimes based on grainy Ring doorbell footage. The top post, with 47 comments, was from Gladys Vander Hoven. Subject: Urgent Safety Alert. Parents, please read. It has come to my attention that certain residents, I won't name names, but we all know who lives on the cul-de-sac, are treating our public roadways as private gymnasiums. I have witnessed children playing in the middle of the street while cars are trying to navigate. This is a death trap. The street is a highway, not a playpen. I have contacted the police, but the parents refuse to listen. We need to reclaim our streets for safe vehicular travel before a tragedy occurs. #safety. First, #bad parenting. Law and order. The comments were a mix of her cronies, shocking, where are the parents, and normal people confused about why she was yelling. But the damage was done. She was framing the narrative. She was painting a picture of our quiet cul-de-sac as a chaotic, high-speed arterial road where children were throwing themselves under the wheels of innocent commuters. I was scrolling through the comments, my thumb hovering over the reply button to tell her to go kick rocks, when I heard the mail slot clack. I walked to the front door. A single, thick envelope lay on the mat. It had the official seal of the City Department of Public Works. My heart did a little stutter step. I tore it open. Notice of complaint and cease desist. Dear Mr. Miller, the city has received multiple formal complaints regarding the unauthorized use of the public right-of-way adjacent to your property. Specifically, reports indicate the placement of obstruction devices, cones, nets, and the presence of unsupervised minors impeding traffic flow. While the city encourages community engagement, Municipal Code 88.4 states that residents must prioritize traffic safety above recreational use. Continued reports of traffic obstruction may result in fines of up to $500 per incident. We urge you to restrict recreational activities to private property to ensure the safety of all road users. Sincerely, the Office of Traffic Safety. I stood in my hallway, reading the letter. I read it twice. Most people would have been crushed. Most people would have crumpled the letter, thrown it away, and told their kids, "Sorry guys, we have to play in the basement from now on." But I am not most people. I am a petty man. I am a man who once spent 3 hours untangling a slinky just to prove it could be done. I looked at the line again. Residents must prioritize traffic safety above recreational use. And then I looked at her next door post again. The street is a highway. This is a death trap. A strange calm washed over me. It was the calm of a man who realizes he has been holding the gun backward, and all he has to do is turn it around. She wasn't just complaining. She was testifying. She was creating a documented legal history claiming that our street was dangerous. She was shouting from the rooftops that the traffic was too fast, the risks were too high, and the current infrastructure was insufficient to protect the residents. If she was right, and the city was now acknowledging her complaints as valid, then the city had a legal obligation to fix it. And fixing it didn't mean removing the kids. You can't remove kids from a neighborhood. That's not how urban planning works. Fixing it meant changing the road. I looked at the clock. It was 8:00 p.m. I went to the fridge, grabbed a beer, and sat down at the table with the cease and desist letter. I smoothed it out. "Okay, Gladys," I whispered to the empty kitchen. "You want safety? You want a highway? Let's treat it like one." I called in sick on Friday. I told my boss I had severe gastrointestinal distress. It wasn't entirely a lie. The thought of what I was about to do gave me butterflies in my stomach. Vindictive, excited butterflies. I put on my best, responsible citizen outfit, a pair of khaki chinos, a blue button-down shirt tucked in, and loafers. I wanted to look like a man who pays his taxes early and worries about his lawn's pH balance. I drove to City Hall. The Department of Public Works is located in the basement, a place where sunlight goes to die. It smelled of floor wax, stale coffee, and the crushing weight of municipal indifference. The walls were painted a color that could only be described as bureaucracy beige. I took a number from the red dispenser. B42. The digital board read B11. I sat on a hard plastic chair for 45 minutes, clutching my manila folder. Inside that folder was the cease and desist letter. Printouts of Mrs. Vanderhoven's next-door rants, time-stamped, and the police incident numbers from her multiple calls. Finally, the bell dinged. Now serving B42. I walked up to window 3. Behind the plexiglass sat a man who looked like he had been molded out of the same beige clay as the walls. He was in his 50s, wearing a short-sleeved dress shirt and a tie that stopped 3 inches above his belt. His name tag read Ron. Ron looked like a man who had heard every complaint in the history of human civilization and found them all equally boring. He was typing slowly on a keyboard that looked like it was from 1998. "Help you?" Ron asked, without looking up. Good morning, Ron, I said, projecting an air of desperate concern. My name is Dave Miller. I'm a resident of the Oaks of Pleasant Valley. I'm here because I'm terrified for the safety of my neighborhood. Ron sighed. It was a long, rattling sigh. He stopped typing and looked at me over his spectacles. Let me guess. Pothole? Streetlight out? Tree branch touching a wire? Worse, I said, leaning in. Speeding. Reckless driving. A complete disregard for pedestrian safety on a residential street. Ron rubbed his eyes. Sir, if you want a patrol car, you call the police non-emergency line. We have, I said, repeatedly, but the police can't be there 24/7, and the situation is escalating. I received this letter from your office yesterday. I slid the cease and desist letter under the glass. Ron picked it up. He scanned it. Okay, so you got cited for obstruction. You want to contest the ticket? You have to go to the magistrate for that. No, I said quickly. I don't want to contest it. I agree with it. Ron paused. He looked at me, confused. You agree with it? Absolutely, I said. The letter says residents must prioritize traffic safety. And it's right. My neighbor, Mrs. Vanderhoven, a wonderful, vigilant woman, has been documenting the dangers for months. She says the street is a death trap. She says vehicles are using it as a thoroughfare. She's terrified a child is going to get flattened. I pulled out the screenshots of her next-door posts and slid them under the glass. I pulled out the police incident logs. Look at this, Ron, I said, tapping the papers. 6 calls to 911 in 2 months. Dozens of social media posts warning of high-speed dangers. If a resident is screaming this loud about safety and the city does nothing but send a letter, well, imagine the liability if someone actually gets hit. Ron's eyes flickered. The word liability is the magic word in local government. It cuts through the fog of boredom like a laser. Liability, Ron repeated. I shrugged. If the city is on notice that the street is a highway, her words, and you don't install traffic calming measures, isn't that negligence? Ron picked up the next-door printout. He read Gladys's all-caps rant about the death trap. He squinted at the police log. Vanderhoven, Ron muttered. Gladys Vanderhoven, 402 Oak Drive. That's her, I said. Ron let out a short, sharp snort. I know her. She called us last week to complain that the street sweeper missed a spot. A single leaf. She wanted me to divert a crew from Main Street to come back and pick up 1 leaf. She is very detail-oriented, I said. She's a pain in my ass, Ron corrected, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He looked at the security camera in the corner, then leaned closer to the glass. What are you getting at, Mr. Miller? I want to help her, I said, keeping my face perfectly straight. I want to give her exactly what she's asking for. If the street is a high-speed danger zone, we need traffic calming, mandatory, immediate. Ron looked at me. He looked at the papers. He looked back at me. A slow, dry smile began to crack the beige facade of his face. He saw it. He saw the game. Traffic calming, Ron mused. You mean speed bumps? Speed bumps, I agreed. Maybe a stop sign, to break up the flow. Ron pulled up a map on his monitor. He clicked a few times. Oak Drive, cul-de-sac. Okay, let's see. If we treat this as a verified safety hazard based on resident complaints, we'd need to place the mitigation devices at the point of highest conflict, which, according to Mrs. Vanderhoven, is the intersection right in front of her house, I pointed out. That's where she says the hooligans impede the traffic. Ron zoomed in on the map. Well, look at that. House 402 is a corner lot. The city easement is generous there, 10 feet from the curb. We own that land. Is that so? I asked innocently. I think she has some prize-winning petunias planted there. Doesn't matter, Ron said, his voice gaining a hint of sadistic pleasure. Easement is easement. If we put in a stop sign, regulations say it has to be 20 feet back from the intersection. That puts the post right about here. He pointed to a spot on the screen that was definitely in the middle of Gladys's garden. And a speed bump? I asked. Standard asphalt cushion, 12 feet wide, painted yellow. Needs to be placed 50 feet prior to the stop control to ensure deceleration. Ron dragged his cursor. He stopped. He looked at me. That puts the speed bump directly across the driveway of 402. So, I visualized it. Every time she backs her car out, she goes thump thump, Ron finished. That sounds incredibly safe, I said. Maximum safety, Ron agreed. She'll never be able to speed out of her driveway again. But Ron, I said, playing the final card, I don't want to file a frivolous request. I need to make sure this is by the book. The city requires a petition, right? Usually, Ron said, leaning back. 51% of residents, plus a traffic study. I can get the signatures, I said. Everyone on the block wants Mrs. Vanderhoven to feel safe. But the study? The city takes months to do those. We do, Ron admitted. We're backed up until 2027. What if I hired a private contractor? I asked. A certified surveyor to do a 48-hour count, to prove the volume and speed warrant the installation. I'll pay for it out of pocket, as a donation to civic safety. Ron looked at me with genuine respect. It was the look one soldier gives another before charging into battle. If you bring me a certified study showing any irregularities, Ron said, combined with this stack of safety reports, from the resident at the target location, I can bypass the standard review. I can put it on the emergency safety rectification list for the city council. Emergency safety rectification, I tested the phrase. I like the sound of that. It's for high-risk areas, Ron said, winking, like school zones or streets where crazy ladies yell at kids. I'll have the study on your desk by next Friday, I promised. Make it a good one, Ron said, sliding my folder back to me, keeping copies of the complaints. And Dave? Yeah, Ron? If this goes through, bring me a donut. Boston cream. You got it, Ron. I walked out of the basement of City Hall feeling 10 feet tall. I had walked into the belly of the beast and found a friend. I had the weapon. Now, I just needed the ammunition. I needed to prove that our quiet, sleepy, dead-end street was actually the Fury Road. I pulled out my phone and called my brother-in-law, Mike. Hey, Mike, I said. You still know that guy Chuck, the surveyor? Yeah, I need to hire him and tell him to bring the loud equipment, the stuff that beeps. The trap was set. Now I just needed Gladys to step into it. And knowing Gladys, she wouldn't just step into it, she would do a swan dive. I met Chuck at a greasy spoon diner called Eggs and Kegs on Tuesday morning. My brother-in-law had described Chuck as a man who knows where the bodies are buried because he probably paved over them. Chuck did not disappoint. He was sitting in a booth that seemed too small for him, wearing a neon yellow safety vest over a flannel shirt, despite being indoors eating pancakes. He looked like a thumb that had been taught to drive a truck. He had a mustache that drooped past his chin, and eyes that had seen the folly of man, and found it uninteresting. So, Chuck said, stabbing a stack of pancakes with the violence of a murderer, you want a traffic count, on a cul-de-sac. Not just a count, Chuck, I said, sliding a coffee mug toward him. I need a comprehensive safety audit. I need volume, speed, and pedestrian conflict points. Chuck chewed slowly. He swallowed. You having a feud with a neighbor? Is it that obvious? I've been doing this 30 years, Chuck grunted. Nobody orders a private traffic study on a dead-end street unless they're trying to screw someone over or they're trying to sell a house. You don't look like you're moving. Her name is Mrs. Van der Hoven, I said. She lives at the corner. She thinks the street is a drag strip. I want to prove her right. Chuck raised a bushy eyebrow. You want to prove the crazy lady right? Technically, I corrected. I want to create a data set that supports her delusions, so the city is legally forced to install infrastructure that ruins her day. Chuck stared at me for a long moment. Then a slow, gravelly sound emerged from his chest. It took me a second to realize he was chuckling. I like it, Chuck said. Weaponized bureaucracy. My favorite flavor. The city clerk, Ron, said I need a certified study, I explained. And I need data. But the street is empty, Chuck. It's a ghost town. If we put the counters out, they'll register 0. Not if you hire me, Chuck said, wiping syrup from his mustache. See, standard study is just tubes. I charge $600 for tubes. But for $1,000? I give you the comprehensive hazard analysis. I set up the tubes, yeah, but I also set up the camera. And I sit in my truck for 6 hours a day logging subjective hazards. Subjective hazards? If a dog runs into the street? Hazard. If a kid chases a ball? Hazard. If a lady walks out to her mailbox and doesn't look both ways? Pedestrian negligence. I write it all down. I make it sound like a war zone. You're hired, I said, extending my hand. Can you start tomorrow? I'll be there at 8 a.m., Chuck said. I'll park right in front of the target's house. Psychological warfare comes free of charge. Wednesday morning arrived with the humidity of a wet wool blanket. True to his word, at 7:55 a.m., a battered white pickup truck with amber warning lights flashing on the roof rumbled into the cul-de-sac. It looked official. It looked serious. It looked like the kind of vehicle that shows up before they condemn a building. Chuck hopped out. He began unloading the equipment. He dragged 2 thick black rubber tubes across the asphalt directly in front of Mrs. Vanderhoven's driveway. He nailed them into the street with confident, metallic clangs that echoed off the houses. Then, he set up a tripod on the verge. Technically public land, but visually part of Gladys's lawn. He mounted a gray box with a camera lens pointing down the street. I watched from my living room window, sipping coffee, feeling like a general observing the front lines. It took exactly 4 minutes. The front door of House 402 flew open. Mrs. Vanderhoven emerged. She wasn't wearing her usual pristine gardening attire. She was in a silk robe, clutching her morning tea, looking like she had been summoned by the noise. She marched down her driveway. I cracked my window open just an inch to capture the audio. "Excuse me!" she shouted over the sound of Chuck's hammer. "What is this? What are you doing?" Chuck didn't even look up. He gave the nail one last tap, stood up, and adjusted his pants. "City-mandated safety audit, ma'am. Routine data collection." "Safety audit?" Gladys stopped. Her posture changed. She went from attack mode to intrigued gossip mode. "The city sent you?" "Indirectly," Chuck lied smoothly. "There's been reports of high-risk traffic activity in this sector. We're here to quantify the danger." "Oh!" Gladys clasped her hands together. "Oh, finally someone is listening!" I grinned. She took the bait. She swallowed the hook, the line, and the sinker. "You have no idea," Gladys continued, stepping closer to Chuck, invading his personal space. "It is a nightmare here. A nightmare. The speeding, the reckless disregard for statutes. Delivery trucks careen around this corner on 2 wheels. Chuck pulled a clipboard out of his truck. "Is that so? You a witness to these events?" "I am the victim of these events." Gladys declared. "I have lived here for 20 years and I have never seen such lawlessness. And the children. There are children playing in the middle of the street constantly. It's a fatality waiting to happen." "Pedestrian obstruction," Chuck muttered, writing it down. "Good to know. We track that. The more conflict points we find, the higher the safety rating score goes." Mrs. Vanderhoven's eyes lit up. She thought a high safety rating score meant the city would come in, ban the children, and perhaps install a gated entry with a guard who answered only to her. She didn't realize that in traffic engineering terms, a high score meant, "We need to pour concrete immediately." "I have evidence," Gladys said. "Wait right here." She ran back into her house. She emerged 2 minutes later with an iPad. For the next half hour, I watched as my neighbor, the woman who had terrorized my children, systematically built the case for her own demise. She showed Chuck photos of Leo playing hockey. She showed videos of the UPS truck parking slightly askew. She showed him a logbook she kept of suspicious vehicles, which included my mother-in-law's Camry. Chuck stood there, nodding, writing, and occasionally saying things like, "Wow, that looks like a Class 3 hazard," and, "Geez, surprised nobody's been killed yet." At one point, she actually brought him a glass of lemonade. She was charming the executioner. "Make sure you put it all in the report," she told him as he finished up. "Make sure the city knows how dangerous this intersection is." "Oh, I'll make sure," Chuck said, taking a sip of the lemonade. "I'm going to write a report they can't ignore." As she walked back inside, triumphant, Chuck looked over at my window. He didn't wave. He just tipped his hard hat. Phase 1 was complete. The testimony. Now for Phase 2, the data. The pneumatic tubes Chuck had installed count cars. They measure volume and speed. But as I told Ron, our street was dead. We needed volume. We needed to prove that this wasn't a sleepy cul-de-sac, but a bustling arterial road that somehow got lost. I picked up my phone. I opened the group chat titled, "The Anti-Gladys Coalition." It included every neighbor on the block except her. Me. "The tubes are live. Repeat, the tubes are live. Operation Truman Show is a go." Bob, House 406. "I'm on it. I have to go to the hardware store anyway. I'll make 3 trips." Sarah, my wife. "I've instructed the book club to park on the street tonight instead of the driveway. That's 12 cars arriving at 7:00 p.m. Teenage kid next door. Kyle. Can I do donuts?" Me. "No donuts, Kyle. But if you want to practice your parallel parking, do it right over the tubes, back and forth. It counts every axle." Kyle. Bet. The next 48 hours were the busiest in the history of the Oaks. It was a beautiful, coordinated ballet of petty revenge. Bob, a retired accountant who usually left his house once a day, suddenly developed a driving addiction. I watched him leave, drive over the tubes, thump, thump, circle the block, come back, thump, thump, pull into his driveway, wait 5 minutes, and leave again. "Forgot my wallet," he yelled to me as he passed the 3rd time. "Forgot my glasses," he yelled the 4th time. "Just felt like a drive," he yelled the 10th time. Kyle, the teenager, took his instruction literally. He spent an hour learning to use the clutch on his beat-up Mustang. He would drive over the tubes, stall the car, restart it, reverse over the tubes, and repeat. Thump, 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 thump. Every thump was a data point. Every thump was a vote for a speed bump. Mrs. Vanderhoven watched from her window. I could see her silhouette. And the beautiful irony? She was happy. She saw the cars. She saw the volume. She thought, "See? I was right. Look at all this traffic." She didn't realize the traffic was synthetic. She didn't realize she was watching a play written, directed, and performed solely for her benefit. On Thursday night, I went door to door with the petition. This was the final piece of the puzzle. Ron said I needed 51% of the neighbors to sign. I went to Bob's house first. "Hey, Dave," Bob said, opening the door. "How's the count going?" "Kyle just did his 50th lap," I said. "We're hitting highway numbers, but I need your signature." I handed him the clipboard. The document was titled, "Petition for Neighborhood Traffic Safety Improvements." "So what does this actually do?" Bob asked, pen hovering. "It asks the city to install traffic calming measures based on the complaints of the resident at House 402, I explained. Specifically, it requests a stop sign at the corner and a speed cushion. Bob's eyes widened. "Wait, a stop sign? At her corner?" "Right in the petunias," I said. Bob signed it so hard he almost ripped the paper. "Can I sign it twice?" "Once is enough, Bob." I went to the Millers. I went to the Garcias. I went to the eccentric guy at the end of the block who breeds parrots. The pitch was always the same. "Gladys is upset about safety. She keeps calling the cops on our kids. We want to give her what she wants, so she shuts up. We're asking the city to install safety devices right in front of her house." The reaction was always the same. A confused pause, a slow dawning realization, a wicked grin, and a signature. I got 90% of the block. The only person I didn't ask was Gladys. I didn't need to. I had her testimony from Chuck. By Friday afternoon, Chuck returned to pick up the equipment. He handed me a thick, spiral-bound report. "You broke the record," Chuck said, impressed. "This cul-de-sac has more traffic volume than a 7-Eleven on a Friday night. And the incident log is thick. I transcribed everything she said." I flipped to the back. There it was. Appendix C, Resident Testimony. Subject expressed extreme fear of vehicle velocity. Subject stated that existing infrastructure is grossly inadequate. Subject demanded immediate municipal intervention. "Chuck," I said, "you're an artist." "I know," Chuck said. "Good luck with the council. Give 'em hell." City council meetings are designed to be boring. They are the civic equivalent of watching paint dry, if the paint could also levy taxes. They are held in a wood-paneled room that smells of lemon pledge and old decisions. The meeting was on a Tuesday night. I arrived early, wearing my concerned citizen costume again. I found Ron near the back. He gave me a subtle nod. "You got the stuff?" Ron whispered. I handed him the report and the petition. Certified study, 90% signature rate, and the resident testimony. Ron flipped through it. He saw the traffic numbers, inflated by Bob and Kyle. He saw the conflict points, Gladys's ranting. He grinned. "I put you on the agenda as item 7, Ron said. Neighborhood Safety Initiative. You'll be right after the proclamation declaring it Pickleball Awareness Month." "Is she here?" I asked. Ron nodded toward the front row. There she was, Mrs. Vanderhoven. She was wearing a suit, a literal power suit with shoulder pads that could take out a linebacker. She was sitting rigid, clutching a binder, ready to speak. She had seen the agenda item. She thought this was her moment. She thought the city was finally holding a hearing to address the hooligan problem. I took a seat 3 rows behind her. The meeting dragged on. They discussed zoning variances for a shed. They discussed the budget for new park benches. Finally, the mayor, a man named Henderson, who looked like he was melting under the lights, tapped his gavel. "Item 7, Henderson droned. "Petition for traffic safety improvements, Oaks of Pleasant Valley. Mr. David Miller?" I stood up. I walked to the podium. I adjusted the microphone. "Honorable Mayor, council members," I began, my voice steady. "I am here today not for myself, but for my neighbor." I gestured to Mrs. Vanderhoven. She turned and looked at me, confused. She hadn't expected me to be the presenter. "Mrs. Gladys Vanderhoven," I continued, "has been a tireless advocate for safety in our neighborhood. For months, she has documented the extreme dangers of our street. She has called the police, she has posted warnings, she has told us repeatedly that our street is a death trap." Gladys nodded vigorously. She whispered, "Yes, exactly," to the person next to her. "I admit," I said, looking down at the podium, acting humble, "that we, the other neighbors, didn't listen at first. We thought the street was safe, but Gladys, she opened our eyes. She showed us the dangers. And so we hired a certified traffic surveyor." I held up Chuck's report. "The data is alarming," I lied. "Traffic volume is high. Conflict points are everywhere. And most importantly, Mrs. Vanderhoven herself gave testimony to the surveyor stating that," and I quote, "immediate structural intervention is required to prevent a fatality." The council members looked at the report Ron had distributed. They saw the words fatality and liability. "Therefore," I concluded, "the residents of the Oaks have signed a petition. We are asking the council to support Mrs. Vanderhoven's plea. We are asking for the immediate installation of Level 4 traffic calming measures. Specifically, a stop sign and a speed cushion at the intersection of Oak Drive, right where the danger is greatest, right in front of House 402. I stepped back. The mayor looked at the paperwork. "Well, this seems comprehensive. Is Mrs. Vanderhoven present?" Gladys shot up like a rocket. She practically ran to the podium. She didn't realize what Level 4 traffic calming meant. She only heard support Mrs. Vanderhoven's plea. "I am here," she announced, "and I want to say that Mr. Miller is finally talking sense. It is a death trap. The cars fly down the street. The children are everywhere. I have been begging for action for months." The city attorney, a sharp-eyed woman at the end of the dais, leaned into her microphone. "Mrs. Vanderhoven, just to be clear, you are stating for the record that the current street configuration is dangerous and that you demand the city install safety devices?" "I demand it!" Gladys slammed her hand on the podium. "I demand you do something! If you don't act and someone gets hurt, the blood is on your hands!" The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. She had just used the blood on your hands line. In a municipal meeting. The city attorney looked at the mayor. The mayor looked at the council. They were all thinking the same thing. Lawsuit. If she was on record screaming that the street was dangerous and they did nothing, they were liable. They had no choice. They were hostages to her rhetoric. "Well," Mayor Henderson said, loosening his collar, "we certainly take safety seriously. And if the residents are unanimous, and the primary complainant is demanding infrastructure." He looked at Ron. "Does Public Works have a recommendation?" Ron stood up. He looked at me. He looked at Gladys. "Yes, Mr. Mayor. Given the severity of the residents' testimony, we recommend the immediate installation of a standard R11 stop sign at the easement of 402 and a 12-foot asphalt speed hump." "Does that satisfy you, Mrs. Vanderhoven?" the mayor asked. Gladys didn't know what an R11 was. She didn't know what a speed hump entailed. She just heard immediate installation. She thought they were installing a "No Children Allowed" sign. "Yes," she beamed. "That is exactly what I want. Strict measures, zero tolerance." "Very well," the mayor said. "Do I have a motion?" "So moved," said a councilman. "Second?" "Second." "All in favor of the safety initiative for Oak Drive?" "Aye," chorused the entire council. "Opposed?" Silence. "Motion carries," the mayor banged the gavel. "Installation to begin within 14 days. Next item. Pickleball." I walked back to my seat. Gladys was glowing. She looked at me and smirked. "You finally learned, David," she whispered as I passed her. "You finally learned that you can't fight the rules." "You're right, Gladys," I whispered back, fighting the urge to laugh maniacally. "You really can't fight the rules. Congratulations. You won." She had no idea. She had absolutely no idea. She had just advocated, under oath, for the destruction of her own front lawn. She had just demanded that the city place a massive, noise-inducing, traffic-stopping piece of metal 10 feet from her bedroom window. I left the meeting before she could ask anyone what a speed hump actually looked like. I drove home, the windows down, blasting Tom Petty's "I Won't Back Down." I pulled into my driveway. I looked at the dark, quiet street. I looked at Mrs. Vanderhoven's immaculate, prize-winning flower bed on the corner easement. "Enjoy it while it lasts, petunias," I said softly. "Enjoy it while it lasts." The countdown began. For 2 weeks, the neighborhood was silent. It was the calm before the storm. I told the neighbors what had happened. Bob laughed so hard he choked on his beer. Kyle, the teenager, was disappointed he couldn't do any more donuts, but I told him the new speed bump would give him plenty of airtime if he wasn't careful. Then came the Monday. The day of reckoning. I took the day off. I had to. I wouldn't have missed this for the birth of my own children. Don't tell Sarah. At 6:45 a.m., the rumble started. It wasn't a car. It was heavy diesel. It was the sound of gears grinding and air brakes hissing. I jumped out of bed, threw on my robe, and ran to the window. A massive flatbed truck was backing into the cul-de-sac. On the back was a steamroller. Behind it was a dump truck full of hot asphalt. Behind that was a city utility truck with a post hole digger. They weren't stopping at the entrance of the street. They were rolling straight toward House 402. I grabbed my coffee mug, which was empty, I was just using it as a prop, and ran out onto my porch. The crew hopped out. They were loud. They were rough. They were beautiful. The foreman, a guy named Tony, who looked like a vending machine with legs, blew a whistle. "All right, let's go. Mark the easement, dig the hole. I want that asphalt down by noon." The sound of the post hole digger starting up was like a chainsaw mixed with a jackhammer. Rat-tat-tat-tat! It pierced the morning air. It pierced the walls of House 402. The front door flew open. Mrs. Vanderhoven ran out. She wasn't wearing her power suit. She was wearing a silk kimono and a face mask of green clay. She looked like a swamp creature that had been evicted. "Stop!" she screamed, running down her driveway. "Stop this instant!" She reached the edge of the lawn just as the auger bit into the soil. Her soil. Her amended, fertilized, prize-winning soil. "My petunias!" she shrieked. "What are you doing to my petunias?" Tony the foreman didn't stop. He just waved a hand. "City property, lady. Step back." "It is not city property. It is my garden." Easement extends 10 feet from the curb, Tony shouted over the engine. Check your deed. We got a work order. Priority installation. Who ordered this? She wailed. I will have you fired. I know the mayor. The mayor signed the order, Tony yelled back. Traffic safety initiative. You wanted safety. You got it. I walked down the driveway. I couldn't help myself. I needed to be closer. Morning, Gladys, I shouted. Looks like they're finally putting in those measures you asked for. She spun around, her green clay face cracking. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for them to dig up my yard. Sure you did, I said cheerfully. Remember the meeting? Structural intervention? Immediate action? This is it. Look, they're putting the stop sign right where the visibility is best. I pointed. The auger had finished. A crane was lifting a 12-foot galvanized steel post. At the top was a massive crimson octagon. Stop. It was beautiful. It was huge. And it was positioned so that it blocked about 40% of her view of the rest of the neighborhood. And look, I pointed to the street. Here comes the asphalt. The dump truck tilted. Steaming black asphalt poured onto the street directly in front of her driveway entrance. The steamroller chugged forward. A speed bump? She gasped. In front of my house? Traffic calming, I corrected. Now nobody can speed past your property. It's what you always wanted. She looked at the stop sign. She looked at the mountain of asphalt. She looked at me. The realization hit her. It hit her harder than the steamroller was hitting the pavement. She remembered the petition. She remembered the surveyor. She remembered her speech. I demand it. I demand you do something. She turned a shade of red that matched the stop sign. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She was trapped in a prison of her own design. Just then, Officer Miller's cruiser pulled up. Gladys's eyes lit up. Her savior! She ran to the car before Miller could even get out. Officer! Officer! Arrest them! They are vandalizing my home! Miller stepped out. He adjusted his belt. He looked at the construction crew. He looked at the permit Tony was holding up. He looked at the stop sign. Then he looked at Gladys. Ma'am, Miller said, his voice dripping with exhausted satisfaction. This is a city project. I was briefed on it this morning. The Vanderhoven Safety Zone, the boys at the station are calling it. The what? She whispered. You fought hard for this, ma'am, Miller said. You should be proud. Most people don't get a dedicated traffic control device named after them. He looked at me and winked, a solid, slow wink. Now, Miller said, I suggest you step back inside. You're violating the safety perimeter of a construction zone, and I'd hate to have to write you a ticket. Gladys Vanderhoven, the terror of the Oaks, the queen of complaints, stood there for a moment. She looked at the destroyed petunias. She looked at the steaming asphalt. She looked at the smiling police officer. She let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream, and wasn't quite a sob. It was the sound of a deflating balloon. She turned around, marched back into her house, and slammed the door so hard I felt the vibration in my feet. Tony, I called out to the foreman. Make that bump extra high, for safety. You got it, boss, Tony grinned. The adjustment period was loud. The first night after the installation, I sat on my porch with a beer. It was dark. A car turned onto the street. It was a delivery driver. He saw the new sign, squeak! His brakes squealed. He stopped. The headlights beamed directly into Gladys's living room window, illuminating her curtains like a stage spotlight. He idled for a second. The engine rumbled. Then he accelerated. Thump, front tires. Thump, rear tires. The sound echoed off the houses. It was a heavy, metallic clunk. 5 minutes later, another car. Squeak, shine, thump, thump. I looked at house 402. The blinds were twitching. She was in there. She was watching. She was listening. She couldn't complain about the noise because she had demanded the safety. She couldn't complain about the lights because the sign was mandatory. But the real victory came on Saturday. I received one final letter from the city. It was from Ron. Dear resident, please be advised that pursuant to City Code 77C, roadways designated as traffic-calmed zones, defined by the presence of speed cushions and stop controls, are eligible for mixed-use recreation status. This allows for street play, hockey, basketball, etc., provided participants yield to vehicles. I framed it. I literally bought a frame from Target and framed the letter. I walked outside. Leo, Sam, get the sticks! We set up the net. We set up the cones. We stood right in the middle of the street, directly in the shadow of the new stop sign. The boys started playing. Clack, clack, clack. The door to house 402 opened. Gladys stepped out. She looked tired. She had bags under her eyes, probably from the headlights. She opened her mouth to yell. She took a breath. Then she saw the speed bump. She saw the stop sign planted in the grave of her flowers. She saw me holding the framed letter. She closed her mouth. She didn't say a word. She just shook her head, turned around, and went back inside. Car! Leo yelled. A Honda Civic came around the corner. It stopped at the sign. It waited for the boys to move the net. The driver waved. Then, slowly, carefully, thump, thump. The car drove on. The boys put the net back. The game continued. The silence of the suburbs was gone, replaced by the rhythm of malicious compliance. And honestly, it was the sweetest music I had ever heard.